My wife was cheating on me. After I took a DNA test, I found out that the father of my children is her personal trainer. Melissa was given the right to remain in our home until the children finished high school, leaving me with the mortgage and utility expenses. In addition, she received half the value of my enterprise, and I had to continue making payments for her vehicle. She walked away with 60 of all our possessions, including bank accounts, investments, and retirement funds. She also secured primary custody of the children, with standard visitation rights for me, which meant I had 2 consecutive weeks during the summer and every other weekend. Child support was set at $800 per month per child, totaling $1,600 monthly. Since she hadn't worked in the last 6 years, she was awarded $2,300 per month in maintenance. The divorce would be finalized in 90 days unless I retracted the petition. Judge Ellen Carter slammed her gavel and began to rise. I couldn't stop myself. I muttered a single word that would alter the course of the next several months of my life. I told her I didn't comprehend what was so difficult and offered to clarify if she found it challenging. Judge Carter froze mid-motion, her head snapping toward me so fast I thought her neck might break. She looked at me as if I had just committed the ultimate sin. Slowly she sat back down, her face changing from shock to pure rage. Her glare was icy enough to freeze the sun. Calling her angry was an understatement. She declared she wasn't foolish and knew what was coming. She didn't care and gave me 1 minute to apologize or face contempt of court. I retorted that at least she'd get one thing right that day, expressing my utter disdain for the situation. My lawyer hissed at me to be quiet, frantically searching his briefcase for something to calm me down. She sneered, slammed her gavel again, and threatened to see how much contempt I'd have after 30 days in jail. Sarcastically, I suggested 60 days and asked if she wanted to go for more. I even added that maybe if she got laid occasionally, she wouldn't be so difficult, raising both middle fingers and telling her to use them to reach a climax and perhaps be less of a nightmare. In my view, she needed a change more than anyone in history. I reflected on the situation, thinking someone might have called 911. 2 possibilities crossed my mind: either she was about to have a stroke or her head was going to explode. Surprisingly, no smoke was visible from her ears, though her face turned an alarming shade of red. After my outburst, she was livid and sentenced me to 90 days. Her voice sounded demonic as the bailiffs took hold of me. My lawyer looked utterly defeated, and the courtroom was in shock. I couldn't help but laugh, which probably explained the psychologist visits I had over the next couple of weeks in lockup. The letter from my lawyer's firm the next day, saying they were dropping me as a client, didn't come as a surprise. So, you're probably wondering what that was all about. Here's a little background. My name is Tom Anderson, and I'm 34 years old. I was born to a decent middle-class couple in the South. I grew up with traditional values where there was a clear sense of right and wrong, respect was earned, and you didn't cheat. Your word meant something. The principles I was raised with were to work hard, be generous with what you have, and stay true to your values. Treat others how you want to be treated. Most people don't consider the flip side. Treat others how they treat you. The Christian thing to do is turn the other cheek, but I've never been good at that. I have a notorious stubborn streak, and when I feel wronged, I don't let it go. In high school, I dated Lisa Brown for a few months. We had an argument and broke up, but it was understood to be temporary. We'd cool off over the weekend and make up by Monday. Unfortunately, I saw my cousin Mark taking Lisa to the theater on Saturday. Mark and I were like brothers, the same age, inseparable growing up. He knew we'd probably get back together, but he took her out anyway. From that moment, he was dead to me. When Lisa tried to talk to me on Monday, I ignored her. At church on Sunday, Mark approached me, but I stared at him silently. When he finished talking, I walked away. Even at Sunday dinner with our families, I ignored him. He tried to play video games with me, but I just left. Our parents tried to make me talk to him, but I refused. A year later, after I stole his girlfriend, I still wouldn't speak to him. I even hit him when he confronted me. He sent me a wedding invitation years later, but I ignored it. When I married Melissa, I invited every member of my extended family to the wedding except Mark. Yeah, I know holding grudges isn't the smartest thing, but when someone intentionally wrongs me, I don't forgive easily. Mark and Lisa's betrayal was no honest mistake. Right now, many of you might think I'm an idiot. If that's the case, let me annoy you a bit more. I firmly believe in facing the consequences of your actions. If you drive drunk and get caught, expect to lose your license, pay higher insurance, and perform community service. If your job depends on driving, you lose your job. That's what I call a foolish tax. If a girl gets pregnant at 18 because she didn't use protection, her foolish tax is being called mommy for the next 18 years. If a guy gets his prom date pregnant, he should step up and take responsibility. Choices have consequences, and it's called personal responsibility. I refused to pay for someone else's mistakes. So I worked hard in high school, got good grades, earned scholarships, and went to college. I did well with the ladies and kept my grades up. I was always on the better-looking side and took care of my health. Sure, I got into more than my fair share of fights because of my beliefs, but I won more than I lost and stayed in good shape. Women found me attractive enough. I graduated with a degree in economics and a minor in accounting, then went on to get my MBA. I landed a decent job at a large company making good money. Being single with not many bills, I started playing the stock market and found I had a knack for it. I did pretty well. A few months into the job, I met Melissa at a party. We hit it off. I asked her out, and it went from there. She was beautiful, and I'm not just saying that because she was my girlfriend. Everywhere we went, she turned heads. All my friends commented on how they'd try to move in if we ever broke up. Even my lesbian friends joked about trying to turn her. Eventually, I proposed, she accepted, and we got married. Melissa went to college too. I joked that she went for her Mrs. degree. She didn't get that, but she did graduate with a degree in art history, which landed her a job as a barista at a local coffee shop. For those confused, an MRS degree signifies a girl who goes to college to delay adulthood and graduates with a husband to take care of her. Yes, I'm an arrogant idiot. Get lost. We settled into married life. Melissa quit her job a week before the wedding and became a full-time homemaker. Our sex life was great, and we bought a nice 3-bedroom house. I was doing well at my job and making good money on the stock market. We weren't living extravagantly, so we saved a lot. All my bonuses went into investments, and I maxed out my 401k contributions. I aimed to retire before 40. Excelling at work, I got substantial bonuses and promotions, climbing the corporate ladder. A few years into our marriage, I came home one Friday to find Melissa dressed up with a huge smile. "Hurry up and get showered and changed. We're going out to celebrate tonight, Daddy." Holy moly, did she just say what I thought she said? We had been trying for a few months, so it wasn't out of the blue, but still it was a surprise. I swung her around, kissing her face all over, figuring we'd be toning down celebrations because of her pregnancy and then the baby. We lit up the town that night. The next several months were joyous as we prepared for our new addition. Then we got another shock twins, 2 little girls. I couldn't wait to spoil them and have 2 daddy's girls. I was on top of the world. The day finally came, and we rushed to the hospital. Our 2 little girls were born a few hours later, beautiful and healthy, with all their fingers and toes. Being twins, they stayed in the hospital a few days longer, but everything was fine when we took them home. Both families were there to greet us. Everyone was happy. My mom couldn't stop staring at them. She was thrilled to finally have the grandchildren she'd been wanting. Life changed for us. I decided that working for the big company kept me away from my family too much. With a ton of money saved, I formed my own company. I was doing well investing, so I got the necessary licenses and opened my own investment firm. I had been helping friends and relatives, so I talked to them about becoming official clients. That got things moving. Several former coworkers moved their portfolios to me as well. Within a year, I had a decent client list, and more people were considering joining. When you're on top of the world, the only direction you can go is down. It was the girls' second birthday party, and we turned it into a full-on production. They wouldn't remember it, but we celebrated and recorded videos for them to enjoy when they were older. Both sides of the family were there. We were all having a fantastic time at the party until I overheard a conversation that changed everything. I had just used the ensuite bathroom in our bedroom, since the hall bathroom was occupied. As I was about to step out, I heard my mom talking to her sister in the hallway. Mom mentioned she couldn't figure out where the girl's blue eyes came from. Her sister suggested she ask me about it. Mom replied that she couldn't imagine what would happen if I found out they weren't mine. She worried about how happy I was and how devastating the truth would be for me. I couldn't listen to anymore. Quietly, I retraced my steps back to the bathroom and locked the door behind me. I needed to think. But the girls had to be mine, right? Surely someone in our families had blue eyes. My eyes were a muddy brown, and Melissa's were more hazel. I mentally pictured all my relatives, but the only person I could think of without brown eyes was my cousin Anna, whose green eyes came from her non-blood-related father's side. Thinking about Melissa's family, I couldn't recall anyone with blue eyes. After a while, I realized I needed to compose myself and rejoin the festivities before being missed. Suppressing my emotions, I put on a cheerful demeanor and returned to the party, enduring a challenging day while mentally strategizing my next steps. Eventually, things quieted down, and everyone left. While putting the girls to bed that night, I scrutinized their features. Some resembled Melissa, but others were unfamiliar, and none seemed to resemble me. The next day, while Melissa napped with the girls, I ordered supplies delivered to my office using a company credit card to keep the invoice hidden. At the same time, I researched local private investigator firms. The suspicion that Melissa had cheated on me nearly 3 years ago was overwhelming. If she did cheat, was she still unfaithful? I needed proof. A few days later, the ordered items arrived, and I met with and hired a firm called Elite Investigations. I provided them with all the necessary information to hack into Melissa's cell phone, tablet, and laptop. Concurrently, I made some financial moves. If she wasn't cheating and the girls were mine, these actions wouldn't matter. However, if my suspicions were accurate, it would safeguard my money from her reach. I refused to fund her infidelity or raise someone else's children. While the girls were innocent victims, so was I. If she chose to mess around and get pregnant by someone else, they could bear the financial responsibility. Nothing was finalized, but I awaited proof. 2 weeks later, I received the letter at my office. Locking my door, I opened it and cried for an hour. The confirmation that they weren't mine hit hard. Deep down, I had sensed the truth but clung to hope. The following day, my PI met with me, providing all the proof he had gathered. Melissa was still involved with her blonde-haired, blue-eyed personal trainer, meeting him a couple of days a week and even taking the girls to his apartment. The audio confirmed they were aware of the real father. The next afternoon, I consulted a divorce lawyer. Rejecting his conventional advice, I prioritized the children's well-being and insisted on preparing the documents, but delaying filing until the right time. The preparations took 2 months, and with zero net income and assets on paper, I left Melissa a surprise. When my cousin Mark and his wife Lisa showed up that weekend, I explained that they had come to see me in my office a couple of weeks ago. After serious discussions, they acknowledged their wrongdoing, sincerely apologized, and I decided it was time to let things go. Goddamn, you people are gullible. Yes, Mark and Lisa did visit me, and they did apologize. That's all true. I genuinely forgave them and welcomed them back into my life. However, I may have overlooked a couple of irrelevant details. Just coincidences, really. Lisa's family includes members who aren't above bending a few minor laws. Some are large and don't hesitate to engage in the occasional barroom brawl. There's even speculation, irrelevant to this story, that a few might be enforcers for a local group of shady businessmen, but it's just gossip. A couple of days before Mark and Lisa's visit, there was a news story about a personal trainer at a local gym being mugged after foolishly trying to fight off 5 muggers. He ended up with a broken jaw, shattered nose, broken ribs, a broken arm, dislocated kneecap, and ruptured testicles. He'll be in the hospital for a while. The police should address the crime issue in town, but there are no suspects since the attackers wore dark clothes, gloves, and ski masks. The blonde-haired, blue-eyed victim will recover after reconstructive surgery and physical therapy, though intimacy might be off the table for a few months. He'll find his car at a chop shop, his credit cards maxed out, bank accounts emptied, and his identity stolen, leading to years of legal battles. Surprisingly, Melissa was despondent for about a week after the mugging, possibly concerned about the rising crime rate. Despite my offer to enhance home security, she remained unsettled. On Monday morning, I instructed my lawyer to complete the paperwork and file it, aiming to have her served on Friday afternoon. He attempted to persuade me to make changes, but I remained firm. By Tuesday, the forms were ready for my review and signature. Meeting him at his office, I finalized everything. He warned me again, but I decided to humor him by giving her the house and even throwing in the investments. However, I made it clear I wouldn't pay a dime beyond that. If she chose to keep the house, She'd be responsible for the mortgage and utilities. Notably, there hadn't been a dime in the investment accounts for over a month. I had no issue giving her 100 of 0. Unbeknownst to Melissa, I had been quietly moving my tools and personal items out of the garage and the house over the past few weeks. Most of my home office equipment and larger belongings found a temporary home at Mark and Lisa's ranch, while smaller, less valuable items were transferred to a one-bedroom apartment I had secretly rented. This apartment was in a complex owned by an offshore LLC with elusive owners, making it nearly impossible to trace back to me. Friday morning finally arrived. I headed to work like any other day, but with a plan in motion. A few days earlier, Mark had helped me move my truck to my office. I left my car there, hopped into the pickup, and drove straight to the bank. I withdrew all the money from our accounts, leaving just $200 in both checking and savings. I also emptied our safety deposit box. Then I drove to the ranch and combined the cash and valuables with my other belongings. I didn't want to risk anyone discovering a new safety deposit box or tracing a wire transfer. Cash would be necessary for what was to come. Why trust Mark and Lisa? Simple. The mortgage on their ranch was held by the same offshore LLC, and despite everything, Mark was still family. You don't mess with family without consequences. The rest of the family took it personally when Mark and I finally reconciled. Returning home late that morning, I parked a few blocks away to check the GPS tracker ID installed on Melissa's car. She was at the mall just as I expected. Rushing home, I parked in the driveway. Over the past few days, I had packed the last of my clothes and belongings, leaving them in the garage. I tossed the boxes into the truck, then quickly grabbed the remaining clothes from the closet and dresser, hangers and all. It took only a couple of trips to load everything into the truck. I didn't bother closing the garage or even the front door as I was leaving. My phone rang. It was Melissa, likely because her credit cards had been declined. I glanced at the GPS signal showing her car moving in my direction and laughed. I tossed my phone onto the table and walked out the door. Within minutes, I was several blocks away, arriving at my new apartment. I unloaded everything from my truck and set it up in my new place. 3 beers later, I sat back in my recliner when my new cell phone rang. Only a few people had this number, and Melissa wasn't one of them. I answered, and the voice on the other end told me she had been served. They assured me I'd receive the video soon. I simply said, "Okay, thank you," and hung up. 15 minutes later, the video arrived in my email. Melissa's shock was palpable. The video showed her being served and collapsing to the floor. The process server checked on her and left. I wished I could see her reaction when she actually read the divorce petition and realized I had DNA and video evidence of her cheating. After that, everything moved at a glacial pace. I got several calls from my old office saying Melissa had called multiple times trying to reach me. She didn't believe them when they said I had resigned 2 weeks prior. She even showed up in person, causing a scene until the police were called to escort her off the property. Mark made a couple of calls to her, but she started pressuring him for information, suspecting his involvement. Restraining orders were filed against her on behalf of my former company and Mark, compelling her to back off. 2 weeks later, my lawyer contacted her to find out who her lawyer was, but she hadn't hired one yet. She was quickly running out of money, with only the cash in her purse and the $200 I left in our accounts. She leaned on her parents for support. Meanwhile, I laid low, not starting any new projects and avoiding leaving anything she could seize. Eventually, she got a lawyer, and meetings were scheduled. I refused to attend, instructing my lawyer not to give her a single penny more. The meetings didn't go well, leading to arbitration. During arbitration, questions about the money arose. Melissa demanded, "Where's all the money, you idiot?" I replied, "What money? We're flat broke. I'm living in the cheapest one-bedroom apartment I could find, picked for its affordability and my acquaintance with the owner. All investments, checking, and savings disappeared due to a disastrous investment investing in a cheating wife," I thought bitterly. That was true. Offshore banks held the funds now, out of their reach. We were giving her the house, with her name on the title. My lawyer suggested he could have been more forceful, but it was like observing a tornado hit a house and noting at least the rubble wasn't on fire. The mortgage was maxed out, and I couldn't afford the payments. Melissa screamed, and it all went downhill from there. Child support? Not my kids, not my problem. Spousal maintenance? No job, no income, no way. She demanded 70 of the liquid assets, there were none. 50 of the business, good luck. 150 of the retirement, all gone. Arbitration failed spectacularly, leading us to court before Judge Ellen Carter, a notorious feminist Manhattan judge. I knew I was screwed. If you think I could convince them there was no money, you'd be wrong. They could check accounts, but the judge used those numbers to calculate my liabilities. They had no way to access the funds. I needed time to move money through various banks and accounts. I went to great lengths to hide the money. I personally withdrew everything from one bank and spread the cash across several accounts at different banks. These accounts were under various names. Thanks to one of Lisa's family's shadier businesses, a gag gift shop that sold fake IDs for entertainment purposes only, as printed on the cards. I even had an ID that claimed I was Jesus Christ, which cost about $150 and was expertly crafted, with the only giveaway being the entertainment statement. For a higher fee, they'd leave out the warning. I also electronically transferred money to other accounts, a method that was traceable but time-consuming and costly. Back in front of the Manhattan judge, 60 days into my 90-day county jail sentence, short-term sentences are served in county jail, not state prison, she sneered, and asked if I'd learned my lesson yet. I replied, about not marrying a cheating spouse? I learned that long before your court. She clarified that she was referring to my attitude in her court, with the vein on her forehead throbbing dangerously. I dismissed any issues with my attitude, and expressed concern for her health while being railroaded in a kangaroo court, suggesting her blood pressure must spike during doctor visits. She warned me that she could extend my stay in jail, and given my attitude, would add another 30 days. She then brought up the purpose of the meeting, questioning why I hadn't made my first 2 child support or maintenance payments to my ex-wife. She also inquired about the absence of my lawyer, questioning if they had abandoned me. Frustrated, she implied that intelligence was supposed to be a requirement for being a judge, and thanked me sarcastically for correcting her on that. She condescendingly offered to explain things in a way that even a 5th grader could understand. By this point, I was starting to think she actually despised me. I'm in jail. I have no access to money. Because I have no access to money, I can't send any. Since it was your decision to put me here, I suggested she explain why she was the reason the cheating woman can't get the money she was trying to steal from me. I asked if she understood or if I needed to slow it down for her. I was then escorted back to my cell for another 90 days, 30 from my original sentence, 30 from her first tantrum, and another 30 that I managed to rack up at the end. To be honest, it really wasn't that bad. Sure, the food sucked, but I still ate it. I had a decent bed to sleep in and lots of free time. I made good use of the weights and exercise equipment. I didn't have many problems inside. First off, my courtroom antics quickly became common knowledge in the jail, earning me a few friends. Second, Lisa's family has a few connections that can be useful on the inside. There was only one problem, and it came from one of Melissa's less intelligent cousins. He thought it would be a good idea to get arrested for a minor offense and spend a week in jail to teach me a lesson. The entire jail population recognized him before he even set foot inside. It didn't take much brainpower to figure out his intentions. Spotted halfway across the yard, an inmate accidentally collided with him while tossing a football, elbowing him in the gut. Undeterred, he continued his quest but was then struck by a basketball 20 feet further. The passer apologized profusely, and another accidental elbow to the chin followed while he was being helped up. After shaking off the incidents, he resumed his trek toward me. With my back turned, he tried to sucker punch me, but I wasn't clueless. Anticipating it, I spun around and delivered a forceful kick to his groin, a clear 65-yard field goal. His accumulated misfortunes landed him in the infirmary. 2 days later, he refused yard exercise, spending most of his time in his cell until he was released. Back in court, facing the judge, she inquired if I was ready to apologize. I asked, for what? She specified, my vile courtroom outburst. I responded, I really don't know what you're talking about. Dismissively, she warned me to keep a civil tongue or face an extended stay. I expressed frustration, mentioning that another judge might take over and that she was on my last nerve. Sarcastically, I suggested that I might start stomping my feet, and perhaps she'd need an EMT in the courtroom if she had a stroke. I pointed out that no child support, maintenance, mortgage, or utility payments had been made as ordered. I explained that I couldn't pay anything while jailed, couldn't work, and emphasized that the kids were not mine. I added that my ex-wife was a cheat and should pay for her own life, maybe charge for it. Addressing another issue, I stated that I had given her half the business and she should have plenty of money. Melissa's lawyer interjected, explaining that they had been unable to take possession of her part of the business. Mr. Anderson had sold his company to an overseas entity about 2 months before filing for divorce, and they hadn't determined the actual owners. Suddenly, an attractive woman approached, stating she represented the board of directors for the firm that purchased the business. She moved to dismiss the ruling, giving Mrs. Anderson any part of a business owned by her ex-husband. She argued that it was irregular to award ownership without the business involvement, since the purchase predated the divorce. This company had no bearing on the case, and they rejected any claim of ownership by Mrs. Anderson. Someone queried about the money from the sale. The young woman explained that the transfer of ownership and payments were conducted overseas. I'm not privy to that information, but my understanding is that the money from the purchase never entered U.S. territory, making it not subject to U.S. laws. Any claim on that money needs to be addressed with your ex-husband, possibly in the country where the money is located. Melissa's lawyer pressed on. Which country is that? The young woman replied, the initial transfer was to Belgium, but it was moved shortly after. I don't know where it went after that. My ex-lawyer, growing more desperate, pointed out that the house was nearing foreclosure since the mortgage hadn't been paid for 3 months, and the utilities were about to be cut off. He mentioned that Melissa's parents had helped initially, but it was becoming too much for them. Despite finding work as a waitress at a local diner, Melissa's income wasn't sufficient to keep up with the bills. The judge turned to me, saying I had 1 week to catch up on all the overdue payments. With a heavy dose of sarcasm, I suggested she show me how to pull cash out of thin air. I reminded her that I was in jail with no access to funds and couldn't work to earn any money. It was absurd to expect me to make payments under these circumstances. I pointed out that I didn't have a lawyer because I was financially broke and questioned the existence of the mysterious accounts they were accusing me of hiding. Even if such accounts existed, I had no information to access them. I challenged anyone to provide details of these alleged accounts and questioned the supposed money from our checking, savings, and investment accounts. I explained that my company had been in poor shape due to previous bad investments, forcing me to sell it at a loss to cover expenses, leaving no money left over. Seeing the court's skepticism, I shrugged, indifferent to whether they believed me. I suggested my ex-wife might have taken the money while cavorting with her boyfriends. Her lawyer objected, saying my accusation didn't make sense. I shot back, it makes as much sense as keeping me in jail without access to money and demanding I make payments. The judge warned me she could keep me in jail until I paid. I stared at her incredulously and sarcastically replied that it made perfect sense to keep me where I couldn't comply with their demands while insisting I meet those demands. 3 months later, the house went into foreclosure, and Melissa lost her Lexus due to non-payment. Unable to afford an apartment, she moved back in with her parents, working 30 hours a week at the diner. Desperate, they begged the judge to release me so I could start making payments. Meanwhile, her lover, now out of the hospital and undergoing physical therapy, struggled to fix his financial mess. His trash credit rating prevented new credit card accounts from being opened in his name. With minimal insurance coverage on his car and part-time work at the gym, he faced high medical bills and deductibles, making it a slow process to pay off his debts. I managed to secure a lawyer and struck a deal with the judge for my release to find work and start making payments. I had to surrender my passport due to suspicions of hidden funds and flight risk. I started working at a local fast food restaurant and moved in with Mark and Lisa at their ranch. Although I knew I was being watched, most of the cash was already hidden. For the next 3 months, Melissa got a court order to garnish my minimum wage, which provided her with very little. During this period, I finalized my plans with Mark. While I was in jail, he emptied my apartment and divided my belongings among our extended family. Packages were sent to a common location undetected by surveillance. Visitors discreetly moved packages during family gatherings and barbecues. I spent my days working or staying at home, avoiding going out. The restaurant eventually obtained a restraining order against Melissa for her constant disruptions at the restaurant. A discreet payment to the manager ensured I kept my job. My lawyer, who initially represented the new owners of my former company, started visiting me at the ranch. Eventually, I hired her as my attorney. She was as fierce as a barracuda, especially during our poolside meetings, ignoring ethical concerns about our lawyer-client relationship. I joked that lawyers treated scruples as negotiable currency, with morals being nothing more than large paintings on walls. So, you're curious about my finances. Yes, I did sell my firm. No, I didn't sell it to myself. I had no intention of letting Melissa get any piece of the firm I was divesting from. By conducting the sale overseas, I ensured the money stayed out of U.S. jurisdiction and beyond Melissa's reach. Bringing any of it into a U.S. bank would expose it to her claims due to the judgments against me. That simply wasn't an option. The sum was substantial, and with my investment accounts, it amounted to around $10 million. I had about $200,000 in cash from various sources, including safety deposit boxes, checking and savings accounts, and safes. Some of this cash went into my plans, but I still had about $150,000 on hand. With no intention of taking the cash with me, I planned a final move. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, we hosted a big barbecue with the extended family. Everything was set for a memorable gathering. I helped Mark with the grill and smoker, and Amanda, my lawyer, mingled with the guests. Later in the afternoon, one of Lisa's uncles approached me, expressing gratitude for helping Lisa and Mark and for reconnecting with them. We chatted, and he discreetly handed me an envelope, which I passed to Amanda for safekeeping. As the evening progressed, I made a grand announcement. The lien holder for the ranch had confirmed that the mortgage was fully paid off, and Mark and Lisa now own the ranch free and clear. The news triggered an explosion of celebration. We partied late into the night. As the guests started to leave, Amanda mentioned she had an early flight the next morning and left with a group of 6 other cars. Her flight was out of an airport in the next state. She had packed earlier and had everything ready in her leased car when she arrived at the party. Instead of returning to her rented apartment, she headed straight to the airport. No one noticed the man climbing out of the back of her car in the parking garage, nor did they pay attention to the man casually walking 50 feet behind her as they made their way to the international terminal. Tom Anderson couldn't travel outside the U.S. because he had surrendered his passport to the court, but Jason Williams's passport didn't raise any eyebrows. No one even glanced at the couple holding hands as they boarded their first-class flight to Mexico City. Amanda White disappeared there, and in her place, Erica Williams joined Jason Williams for their connecting flight to Ecuador. 2 days later, Greg and Emma Johnson arrived at their new hacienda on the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica. Along the way, they had become members of the Mile High Club. Strangely, an old Chevy pickup resembling the one that vanished from Mark and Lisa's ranch awaited them. 2 weeks after the barbecue, a bench warrant was issued for Tom Anderson. He was fired 2 days after the barbecue for a no-show, no call. With no payments made to his ex-wife since then, Mark and Lisa faced the court. A lawyer in a sharp suit argued that the couple had no responsibility for their cousin, who had rented a room and then disappeared. They even filed a suit against him for back rent. All they could say was that he drove off in his old pickup one afternoon and never returned. Though skepticism was high, there was no proof to contradict their story. Over the next several years, Tom Adams ran a small charter fishing business, and Emma managed their cozy beachside cantina. They thrived in the small village, living in one of the larger haciendas and enjoying several luxuries. Guests visited from time to time, including Mark, Lisa, and other family members. It was a simple, delightful life for Greg and Emma, who were deeply in love. Most evenings, they hosted friends and neighbors in the cantina or their lavish hacienda. Their wealth and friendliness quickly earned them a place in the community. Whenever a need arose, they donated generously. Greg dabbled in the stock market when not out on his boat or in the cantina, even setting up accounts for some locals and helping them manage their finances. As for Judge Ellen Carter, life threw her a curveball. A few years after my escape to Costa Rica, her wife, known for her disdain for men, was caught having an affair with a man. The judge had adopted her wife's 3 children when they married. Following their split, Judge Carter was ordered to pay child support, alimony, and house payments to her ex-wife. Adding to her humiliation, her ex-wife quickly moved her boyfriend into the house, continuing their affair openly. Though not officially married, they behaved like a typical couple. Rumors swirled about their planned wedding date, set exactly 1 week after their youngest child graduated from college. coinciding with the end of Judge Carter's financial obligations.